Elara's life was a symphony of straight lines and sterile surfaces. As a successful architect in a city that worshipped glass and steel, she spent her days crafting structures that were impressive but soulless. The once bright spark of her creativity had been dimmed by deadlines and demanding clients, leaving her feeling like a ghost haunting the very buildings she designed. Her latest project was the most formidable yet, a sleek, ultra-modern tower for a global tech company, a monolith intended to erase the history of its location. A small, unassuming clock repair shop, the last relic on the demolition site, stood as the final obstacle. Her instructions were clear: assess the building, document its dilapidated state, and prepare the final report that would seal its fate. A simple task, a routine procedure she had performed countless times before. Yet, as she approached the address, a strange sense of unease settled in her stomach, a feeling she couldn't quite place. The shop was a pocket of the past, squeezed between two faceless high-rises. Its window was a chaotic mosaic of timepieces, some polished and gleaming, others dusty and forgotten. She pushed the bell, and the door opened with a gentle chime, the sound and melody of brass and memory. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood, machine oil, and something else, something akin to patience and time. Every surface was piled high with clocks of all sizes and eras. The rhythmic, synchronized ticking was a living, breathing sound, a constant reminder of the passing moments. In the center of the room, bathed in a pool of soft light from a single lamp, sat the owner. His hands, though calloused and strong, moved with an almost impossible delicacy, holding a tiny gear as if it were a fragile bird's egg. He was meticulously focused, his face a canvas of quiet concentration, his presence radiating a profound dedication she had never encountered. He was the human embodiment of the warmth and purpose her world lacked. He didn't notice her at first, lost in the delicate dance of springs and cogs. And in that moment, she found herself captivated. For the first time in months, the lines on her blueprint didn't feel so straight, and the world outside the dusty window seemed to blur away. Elara's professional composure returned as she cleared her throat, breaking the silent, rhythmic harmony of the room. The man looked up, his movements fluid and unhurried. His eyes, the color of warm honey, met hers, and a flicker of recognition passed between them, though they were strangers. He set the tiny gear aside, wiped his hands on a worn cloth, and stood. His presence filled the small space with an understated grace. She introduced herself as the architect from the firm handling the new tower project, her voice sounding oddly formal in the intimate space. A shadow crossed his face, but it was not one of anger. It was a deep, quiet sadness, like the fading light of a long evening. He simply nodded, his gaze sweeping over the countless clocks. He was not just a repairman. He was a curator of time, a keeper of forgotten moments. He spoke of the shop not as a building, but as a living entity, filled with the collective history of its timepieces and the stories they held. This was his legacy, a tradition passed down through generations. He just led to a grand grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum still. He explained how it had been his grandfather's, and how he had spent his whole life trying to restore it. Elara felt the weight of her blueprints pressing down on her. The glass and steel she designed now felt brutally cold and empty in comparison to the warm, pulsating life of this shop. She had been sent to document its end, but every ticking clock was a quiet rebellion against her purpose. He showed her a small, ornate pocket watch, its face cracked. It had belonged to a young soldier returning from war, a gift for his beloved. The delicate machinery inside was beyond repair, its story forever frozen. She felt a profound melancholy, a stark contrast to the sterile pragmatism she was used to. He showed her another clock, its face a swirling galaxy of blues and purples. It had been made for a couple who met stargazing, a symbol of their love that was as vast as the universe. The hands had stopped the day they parted ways, its cosmic purpose unfulfilled. Elara's hand reached out, drawn to the silent, still hands of the clock. In that moment, the sterile report she was there to write seemed utterly irrelevant. She was a professional, a woman who built the future. But in this dusty shop, she felt an overwhelming desire to save the past. As the afternoon light began to fade, she realized that what she saw before her was more than a building. It was a heart, ticking softly, a beat she felt a strange, compelling need to protect. The sterile air of Elara's office felt like a cage after the living warmth of the clock shop. The polished glass walls, the sleek, minimalist furniture, and the perfectly organized blueprints on her desk now seemed alien and cold. The memory of the countless ticking clocks and the quiet dedication of their keeper was a powerful current pulling against the tide of her professional life. She was an architect, a builder of the new, but a profound unease settled in her stomach as she looked at the pristine plans for the tower. The place she was meant to demolish now felt more alive than anything she had ever created. She spent the next few days in a quiet rebellion, her mind refusing to focus on the cold logic of her work. Instead, she immersed herself in the history of the small clock shop. The man's name was Leo. He was the third generation to run the place, and it was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary for time itself. She learned of the countless clocks he had repaired, each with its own story, its own tiny heartbeat. She found old articles and photos, piecing together a legacy she was tasked with erasing. The more she learned, the more she felt a growing sense of responsibility, a need to protect this history from the unyielding march of progress. With a determination she hadn't felt in years, she devised a new plan. It was unconventional, risky, and entirely against her firm's ethos. She would propose integrating the clock shop into the new tower's design. She imagined a glass atrium where the old shop would stand as a centerpiece, a living museum, a tribute to the past. Her colleagues were dismissive, her boss incredulous. The proposal was met with polite but firm resistance. It was inefficient, impractical, and frankly, unprofessional. She was told to stop wasting her time and to finalize the demolition report. A heavy silence followed the meeting. The pressure to conform, to return to the path she had always followed, was immense. She could have easily typed up the report and let the demolition proceed. But something had fundamentally shifted inside her. The soulless glass and steel no longer held any appeal. She closed her laptop, her decision made. She would return to the clock shop, not as the representative of a powerful firm, but simply as herself. As she walked toward the door, she knew she was risking everything. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the city, and she was no longer just an architect building the future. She was a woman choosing to fight for a past she was just beginning to understand. The chime of the shop door felt different this time, less a greeting and more a solemn announcement. Elara walked inside, no longer an emissary of the corporate world, but a woman with a confession to make. The scent of oiled metal and old wood wrapped around her like a blanket. Leo was at his workbench, a magnifying glass held to his eye, his movements as steady as the ticking clocks. He looked up, his expression unreadable, and she saw a flicker of that quiet sadness again. She didn't know how to start. The perfect, polished words of her architectural presentations seemed useless here. She spoke simply, her voice low and earnest, explaining her firm's mission and her role in it. She watched his face, expecting to see anger, or at least a bitter resignation. Instead, a wave of profound sorrow washed over his features, a melancholy she now understood. He sat back, his hands resting on his worn workbench, and the ticking of 100 clocks seemed to fill the silence, a chorus of witnesses to her confession. He didn't need to ask why. He simply nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. He spoke of the legacy, not with pride, but with the quiet dignity of a man who had accepted his fate. He had tried everything. He had appealed to the city council, hired lawyers, even tried to find a historical society that could save the building. But the city had made its decision, and there was no changing the tide of progress. He pointed to the grandfather clock in the corner, its hands forever frozen at midnight. He said he had worked on it his whole life, but its heart was simply too old. He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw the same quiet surrender she had fought against in her own life. The shared hopelessness created an unusual bond between them. Elara reached into her bag, pulling out her own useless, rejected proposal. He took it, his strong, calloused hands turning the pristine pages. He saw the beautiful, impossible vision she had designed, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. They were no longer on opposite sides. They were two people, defeated but not broken, looking at the remains of a dream. He stood and walked to a small, hidden compartment behind a tall clock. He pulled out a small, ornate wooden box. Inside were dozens of tiny, intricate keys. "They're for the clocks," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "My grandfather always said the true heart of the shop was not its walls, but the secret it held." He handed her a yellowed parchment from the box, a detailed architectural sketch of the shop, with a single cryptic note in the corner. "The true heart is always hidden." Elara looked from the map to his face, a new kind of fire igniting inside her. It was no longer about a building. It was about a mystery, a final, beautiful, and impossible challenge they would face together. The clock shop, which had always felt like a sanctuary, now buzzed with the quiet energy of quest. Armed with the cryptic sketch and a handful of tiny, ornate keys, Elara and Leo moved through the aisles, no longer as adversaries, but as conspirators. Their movements were a silent ballet of shared purpose. Elara, with her architect's eye, found the hidden inscriptions and subtle carvings that escaped a casual glance. Leo, with his intimate knowledge of every timepiece, instinctively knew which key belonged to which lock, his hands moving with the grace of a master craftsman. They worked for hours, a tapestry of clues slowly unspooling before them. One key opened a small compartment in a wall clock, revealing a tiny scroll with a fragment of an old poem. Another unlocked the face of a cuckoo clock, exposing a hidden message etched into the wood. Each discovery was a piece of a larger puzzle, a breadcrumb trail left by a man who had wanted to ensure his legacy would not be lost to time. Their hands brushed often as they passed keys or pointed out a subtle detail, a silent language developing between them that was more profound than any words could convey. The final key, a tarnished silver one with a lion's head, was the only one that remained. Following the last clue, a line about a lion's roar, their gazes fell upon the grandfather clock in the corner, the very one that Leo had given up on. Its pendulum was still, its face frozen in time. With a steady hand, Leo inserted the key into a nearly invisible lock beneath the lion's head carving. The clock emitted a low, resonant hum, a sound neither of them had ever heard before. The face swung open, revealing not a broken mechanism, but a sealed compartment. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was a single old document. It was a legal deed, carefully notarized, that granted the clock shop historical landmark status decades ago, but with a unique binding clause. The protection would only be valid if the true heart of the shop could be proven to exist. A final, cryptic note from Leo's grandfather was attached, explaining his reasoning. He hadn't wanted the shop to be saved by a simple piece of paper. He wanted its true value to be found and understood by someone who would fight for it. The true heart was not a thing at all. It was the love and dedication of its keeper, a treasure to be uncovered by the person who cared enough to look. In that moment, Leo understood. The clock wasn't broken. It was simply waiting. He looked at Elara, and a single, joyous tear escaped his eye. The ticking of the 100 other clocks in the shop now seemed to beat in perfect synchronicity, a symphony of hope, their sound a triumphant melody to their shared future. The conference room, all glass and polished steel, felt impossibly small as Elara and Leo stood before her former colleagues and the city representatives. The documents were laid out on the table. The notarized deed, the grandfather's cryptic notes, and a meticulously prepared new architectural plan that Elara had worked on all night. She spoke with a passion she had never felt during her professional life. Her voice no longer a monotone of facts and figures, but a vibrant melody of conviction. She explained how the true heart of the shop was not a hidden object, but the tangible legacy of love and dedication, a living artifact that a city must protect. The city council members, a mix of skepticism and curiosity, were swayed by the irrefutable legality of the document and the quiet, unwavering presence of Leo. He spoke only once, a simple statement about his grandfather's vision and how a city's future is not just what it builds, but what it chooses to remember. Her boss, the man who had dismissed her, simply looked from the plans to Elara, seeing not a subordinate, but an equal, a visionary who had found a new, more profound purpose. The vote was unanimous. The demolition was officially called off. The clock shop was safe. The walk back to the shop was a silent celebration. The city, which had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, now felt like a place of endless possibility. When they arrived, the familiar scent of old wood and brass seemed to welcome them home. Leo walked to the grandfather clock, and with a final, confident twist of a winding key, he set its pendulum swinging. A soft, steady rhythm filled the air, a gentle heartbeat of triumph. Elara watched, a smile spreading across her face. Her life, once so meticulously planned and linear, now felt as intricate and beautiful as the gears of 1,000 clocks. In the days that followed, the clock shop became a new kind of space. Elara resigned from her firm, embracing a new path. She was now a restorer, a preserver, a partner in a mission far more fulfilling than any skyscraper. They worked together, side by side, their hands moving in perfect harmony. They meticulously restored the clocks, their quiet shared moments filled with the gentle click and tick of their work, the occasional brush of a hand, the silent understanding that their lives, once so separate, were now perfectly intertwined. One evening, as the sun set, casting a golden light through the dusty shop windows, Elara stood by the grandfather clock. Its pendulum swung with a steady, rhythmic beat, a symbol of their shared future. Leo walked up to her, his shadow long and comforting. He didn't need to say a word. He simply took her hand, his callous palm fitting perfectly against hers. The ticking of every clock in the shop seemed to slow down, holding its breath, as if waiting for a single, perfect moment. In the gentle, golden light, they stood together, two hearts beating as one, a timeless melody in a world of ever-changing time. Their journey had not been about stopping time, but about finding a love that would last for all eternity.